The National Desk, America's News, now.
This week, new charges for the man accused in the Highland Park shooting. 7 lives lost, dozens hurt, the nation asking how to move forward.
I'm not going to go to a parade anymore. I'm not going to a sporting event.
It's hard to be strong for your children.
Tonight, what we know about the suspect, his plans, his motive.
Cremo pre-planned this attack.
I don't know what got him to this point.
And his social media posts, were there warning signs? One of the nation's legal heavy hitters joining a lawsuit against a public school district.
If you come out in this world with no education, can't read or write, you're already in prison.
Where the group is claiming education for black and brown kids just isn't cutting it. And our fact-check team uncovers other major cities dealing with the same major problem. And the abortion debate getting louder across America, states making moves this week to both protect and get rid of the procedure, and why some same-sex couples are now urging their local lawmakers to act. This is the National Desk, America's News Now, the weekend edition. I'm Angela Brown. We begin with the big headlines of the week and a look ahead. We are following 4 major stories this week. The deadly mass shooting at a 4th of July parade, raising questions about safety and social media in America. More migrant encounters at the southern border have some officials calling it an invasion. A school district is being sued for not giving kids an adequate education, and the decision on Roe versus Wade, the push to stop and protect abortion access. But we begin with new details about the Highland Park shooting suspect and a possible second attack. Police say Robert Cremo III drove to Madison, Wisconsin, and thought about shooting more people at a July 4th celebration in Madison, but drove back to Illinois, where he was arrested. We're also learning how Cremo got his guns. Officials say he passed several background checks, despite a previous police report from a family member who said he threatened to kill everyone in 2019. Cremo's charged with 7 counts of murder, and more charges could come. Those charges could include assault for each person shot, the youngest victim only 8 years old. The family of Cooper Roberts say he is sedated and on a ventilator. His mother and twin brother also shot that day. Doctors are unsure if Cooper will ever walk again.
They're devastated, but they're focusing all of their energy right now on Cooper. It's been a very emotional time for everybody in their circle. And, you know, if you know Keely, she's just a fighter. And it sounds like Cooper got that part of her in him because he's fighting as hard as he can.
His twin brother is recovering at home along with their mother. The parents of the shooting suspect are also facing some tough questions about whether they bear some responsibility. The suspect's father is talking to the New York Post, insisting he did nothing wrong, despite signing off on a form that allowed his son to buy the very gun used in that shooting. Police also discovering a trail of troubling social media posts, a pattern we have seen before in other mass shootings. The National Desk's Ultra El Nishar takes a look at what can be done to spot these warning signs before it's too late.
A look inside the mind of a suspected killer found too late. Robert Cremo III posted images depicting shootings, racist calls for violence on message boards, music videos depicting violence, all things officials are now reviewing. Signs many say should have been a warning of what was to come, along with incidents the Lake County Sheriff's Department says date back to April 2019, like police removing almost 20 knives from Cremo's home after a family member reported Cremo said he was, quote, going to kill everyone. Many politicians saying it's on tech companies to flag these posts.
Be more responsible and more accountable about communicating to local law enforcement when there is someone threatening to carry out a mass casualty assault and who seems to have both the inclination, the ability, and the means to do so.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams said the same about racist posts by suspected subway shooter Frank James.
There's a corporate responsibility when we are watching hate brew online.
New York's Attorney General launching an investigation into several platforms, including Twitch, 4chan, 8chan, and Discord, allegedly used by accused Buffalo shooter Peyton Gendron. It's unclear if legislation will come from this investigation. Most platforms already employ thousands of content moderators and use AI to detect disturbing content. Chamber of Progress CEO Adam Kovacevic argues tech companies are focused on making sure they don't become hotbeds for hate.
There are easy mechanisms for reporting troublesome content to authorities and to law enforcement when that kind of thing happens.
Law enforcement has also come under scrutiny. The FBI admitted it didn't follow protocol after getting a report about Nicholas Cruz's disturbing social media posts more than a month before he killed 17 students and staff at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in 2018. For years, lawmakers have been debating how or if to regulate social media content moderation and transparency, but so far, no legislation has made it through Congress. On Capitol Hill, I'm Autrell Nashar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Now to Richmond, Virginia, where one phone call may have prevented a mass shooting. Police say a 911 caller overheard a plot to target a holiday celebration at a local amphitheater. Officers arrested 2 men from Guatemala and seized multiple guns. Both men charged with being non-citizens in possession of a firearm. Court documents say neither are in the U.S. legally. A troubling new report about the school shooting in Uvalde outlines a series of missteps and missed chances that may have saved lives. The Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training Center at Texas State University based their findings on video, police body cam, and testimony from officers. Alert concluded a Uvalde police officer spotted the shooter outside the school, was ready to take that shot, but did not hear back from his supervisor in time. Also, a school district police officer drove through the school parking lot, but did not see the shooter, and the door the gunman walked through was not properly locked.
The report just confirms what we all feared, that they didn't act. It's disheartening. These law enforcement officers are being paid, and they didn't do their job.
The report says some of the 21 victims at Robb Elementary School, including 19 children, possibly could have been saved. In Texas, Governor Greg Abbott doubling down on the state's controversial border security plan, despite new reports that the Department of Justice is investigating the state for potential civil rights violations. Operation Lone Star targets migrants coming across the U.S.-Mexico border illegally. The DOJ is investigating whether the program is in compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, or if the state is discriminating based on race. Even so, Governor Abbott announcing an additional $30 million in funding for the operation this week. His announcement coming as border officials report increased traffic at the southern border. Rio Grande Valley sector agents encountered 403 migrants in 3 large groups last weekend. Those encounters come nearly a week after 53 migrants were found dead in the back of a sweltering tractor trailer. So far, all but 6 of the victims have been identified. 22 were from Mexico, 19 were from Guatemala, and 6 were from Honduras. 4 only teenagers. The alleged driver remains in jail and will stay there until his federal trial after he waived his rights to a detention hearing. That's according to new reports. Well, following that tragedy, the sheriff of Bexar County says he pitched several solutions to fix the immigration crisis in a meeting with the White House, telling officials the immigration policy is forcing people to work with smugglers, making drug cartels richer. Sheriff Salazar is asking for more help fighting human smuggling. Officials reportedly said they're looking into implementing some of his suggestions. Public school enrollment falling around the country. Coming up, why one mother says her children are going private.
I'm Kayla Gaskins in Baltimore, where one of the biggest legal heavy hitters for civil rights cases is joining a lawsuit against Baltimore City public schools. How this could be the start of a nationwide trend.
You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. You can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and then 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. And of course, anytime at thenationaldesk.com. We will be right back. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. From public school enrollment sinking in Seattle to inflation hitting the wedding industry in Texas, we are taking the pulse of America, but we start with gun rights advocates in New York calling New York's laws unconstitutional.
It's a direct challenge to the Supreme Court ruling.
Husband and wife, Lisa and Richard McLeod, own Recon Defense, a business that sells guns and trains people how to use them in New York. Since the state's new restrictive gun laws passed last week,
our phone has not stopped ringing. Everyone is so confused. No one knows what to do.
New York Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik says New York's new laws are unconstitutional. The new law classifies specialized areas, including public parks, as restricted areas and outlaws concealed weapons at private businesses unless the business posts a sign saying guns are allowed.
You cannot pull into a gas station or any commercial facility that is not posted with a Pro 2A sign. Basically, it makes travel next to impossible in the state of New York.
The McLeods say the law now requires so much training, getting a permit will cost hundreds or even thousands of dollars.
It's going to put senior citizens, it's going to put fixed income, it's going to put lower income people just out of the loop.
Oopsie, that's okay.
Ashley Beatty is all about her kiddos, 4-year-old Wills and 6-year-old Ellie.
Oh, good job.
It's why their family moved to Laurelhurst for her kids.
Moved to our neighborhood here in Laurelhurst for the public school. That was a huge draw.
But despite her intentions, she said the nearby Catholic school got her vote and her kids.
Felt an immediate sense of community and support that I didn't really feel at the public school.
She's part of what appears to be a concerning trend at Seattle Public Schools, shrinking student enrollment. You can see the downward trend from 2015 to now. At the start of the pandemic, compare that to projections for this coming school year. That's a 7.7 drop over 3 years.
That's a lot.
For statewide student enrollment, it dropped 3.4% over 2 years from the start of the pandemic. Less students means less money. Schools get state funding based on the number of students.
This is an issue that affects everybody, no matter what neighborhood you live in or what your income level is.
When Denise Flores' fiance popped the question,
it was surprising, exciting. I loved it. I love it.
She knew she was in for an expensive venture, but inflation is hitting hard. Catering, flowers, DJs, planners, all raising their prices.
I thought that I could have the wedding that I wanted with maybe $10,000, and now I'm looking to double that.
Cedric Jones started his photo booth business mid-pandemic, and he says the inflation now feels like a 1-2 punch.
As a new business, you know, it takes a while to even make a profit. So to have to already increase your prices when you're just getting started.
It's hurting wedding dress shops too.
Normally we get a price increase about every 2 years from our designers, and then it went to about once a year, and now it's like every 6 months.
Bridal Connection says they are seeing more brides come in.
All day long, it was like, yeah, it was all these yes to dresses.
And even through inflation, Flores says,
it's your one special day. Like, you know, you're only gonna have one wedding in your lifetime.
Public schools receive billions of dollars in taxpayer money, but some parents say they are failing to educate their children. One community is taking their frustration to court, filing a lawsuit attracting one of the biggest names in civil rights law. The National Desk's Kayla Gaskins breaks down the suit.
The children deserve better.
This is what the fight is for. It's about his future.
Legal heavy hitter, prominent civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump joining a lawsuit against the city of Baltimore, the mayor, and the school board for their poor education system.
If you come out in this world with no education and no literacy, you can't read or write, you're already in prison.
An investigation into the public school system by Sinclair's sister station WBFF in Baltimore found a pattern of changing grades, student enrollment in classes that didn't exist, and ghost students kept on the books.
You had 5 dead students enrolled at your school.
At the time that I inherited the school, yes.
They did so much wrong to my son. He got caught into the whole changing of the grade, changing of the attendance records.
Is this a civil rights issue?
Absolutely.
You can kill people in many ways. These slow deaths are what we're focused on today. These slow deaths where our children are being killed softly by uncaring, unsympathetic school system that says it's okay for you to be left behind.
The problems plaguing Baltimore City public schools are not unique to Charm City. Urban school systems across the country reporting inadequate student performance.
I do think this is bigger than just Baltimore. I think in Rochester, New York, and places like New Orleans, places all across America have these failing grades.
A $1 billion investment in Rochester, New York has done little to move the needle on education quality, as reported by Cheryl Atkinson.
It's not based on money because it's funded tremendously. One of the highest per capita funding mechanisms across New York State and the country.
And Baltimore City Public Schools spends 25% more than the national average per student each year. Charm City on pace again to surpass 300 homicides for the 7th year in a row. As the lawsuit lays out, increasing education lowers overall crime and boosts the economy, creating a next generation who will contribute rather than drain society.
Do you see yourself taking on more cases like this in the future?
Well, I think when you have influence, you have to use it to impact those who need it the most.
Last year, nearly half of high school students in Baltimore City schools earned below a 1.0 GPA, and only 21% of students had a 3.0 GPA or higher. I'm back with our fact check team. Connor, you looked into this. Why is Baltimore's education system struggling?
Well, a 2-year investigation by an inspector general found that administrators inflated grades and enrollment. So we haven't been able to track how students are doing until those reports came out exposing the fraud. A spokesperson for the district said the reason for the inflated grades is because of, quote, growing pains due to new policies. But it's important to point out that funding for schools is based on a per student model. So when enrollment is inflated, more money is given to the school than it should be.
And Courtney, you looked into other cities and the problems they're facing. What'd you find?
Right. We looked into a study from Brightbeam that found several major cities in the U.S. have race gaps in both math and reading. Minneapolis and Portland have over 40-point race gaps in math and reading. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, there are 58-point gaps in 2 critical subjects. Now, this isn't the case with just achievement. We're also seeing graduation rate gaps as well. For example, in Minneapolis, 87% of white students graduate compared to 62% of black students.
Courtney and Connor, thank you both. Our fact check team will continue to follow developments on these and other issues. You can also read this story with links on where the two found their information. We've put it all on our website. Just go to thenationaldesk.com.
U.S. officials asking the FTC to shut down a popular app, the information conversation that has TikTok back in hot water, plus your social media used against you. Cybersecurity expert Lisa Garber warns us about the ways law enforcement can track what you do online and why. New security concerns about TikTok that is owned by Beijing-based ByteDance. A new report from BuzzFeed News uncovered leaked audio from internal meetings capturing employees in China, reportedly saying they could access U.S. user data. Now, 2 U.S. senators are asking the FTC to investigate TikTok, insisting all U.S. user data is stored on American soil. That's what TikTok is saying. Well, this controversy comes as police around the country are taking heat for using websites like Google, Facebook, and Twitter to find suspects in crimes like murder and arson. Our Megan O'Halloran asked cybersecurity expert and tech lawyer Lisa Garber about this tactic.
The term we're looking for here is a search term order. It's basically a pretty broad warrant. It's a technique that's been used by law enforcement for a couple of years now. It's pretty secretive. A lot of the records where this type of warrant has been used have been kept under seal. There have been a couple public cases that have come to light. And right now, the results of that type of warrant are being challenged because it's seen as extremely broad. In the case that we're discussing, they looked for whether arson was searched. They looked for the home address where the fire took place was searched, and came to 3 subjects who were identified and then charged with murder and a variety of other issues. But the problem here is that it's really a type of warrant with results that you couldn't see from anything else because you're looking at what people are searching. You have no idea who you're targeting, but it's just broad search terms. Google can fight these types of requests, but it's based on what their own arguments are.
Well, some would say that this type of investigation is just good modern police work. Instead, it's turned into a constitutional law case. How does the First Amendment fit into all of this?
Tech has really changed how police conduct investigations, but what's important here is there are a few key constitutional issues at stake. We have the First Amendment could have a chilling effect on free speech. Google is obviously, when we search for things, it can be very private. It might be things we don't even share with our spouse or a healthcare professional or a priest. And then in addition, it's a Fourth Amendment issue against unreasonable search, right? Because if they are conducting searches based on simple terms that you're typing into Google or any other search engine, it's extremely broad. It's a contentious issue for privacy professionals under the First and Fourth Amendments, and this is the first time it's come up in court. We will see how this plays out. It's really important for the state of privacy in this country.
Let's switch gears now and talk about Facebook. Earlier this year, the tech giant settled a $90 million class action lawsuit over privacy concerns with the site. Big defeat for Meta. However, it's now being reported that Facebook is stifling or blocking users from sharing the news of the settlement. What's going on in Silicon Valley? And is this more of a big tech going power crazy?
The case itself, this $90 million settlement, dates back through a 10-year saga in the courts. And Facebook settled. They said that the issue was with trackers after you logged out of your Facebook account, tracking what you were doing on other websites. So if you were a Facebook user back in 2010 or 2011, you should check and see if you are entitled to any part of this $90 million settlement, which once it's finalized could be the 7th largest privacy class action settlement in the United States. Pretty big deal.
And we also asked if these companies are within their rights to stop the spread of what they call misinformation, or if they're setting up themselves for more legal action. We'll have the interview posted right now at thenationaldesk.com. The Supreme Court's decision on Roe versus Wade causing controversy around the country. The abortion rules now in place and where lawmakers are pushing to keep abortion access. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now, the police chief in Akron, Ohio says officers are giving formal interviews as they investigate the shooting death of Jalen Walker. Walker, a black man, was shot several times by police during a traffic stop. The investment team from Wells Fargo now saying a recession is coming. They predict it'll last about a year. And teens in suits now banned from several movie theaters, the trend inspired by the movie Minions that took TikTok and the trend by storm. These stories and more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. And looking ahead at headlines we're following next week, the next hearing for the January 6th committee is now set for next Tuesday at 10 a.m. It will attempt to tie former President Donald Trump to extremist groups who led the riot that day. New inflation numbers are expected next Wednesday, and some economists are predicting that number could hit 9%. And the teen accused of killing 4 of his classmates at a Michigan school is expected back in court on Thursday, July 21st. Still to come, declaring an invasion. Former acting Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, Mark Morgan, tells us what that even means as efforts to control the southern border ramp up. And same-sex couples expressing concern the Supreme Court won't stop at Roe, while lawmakers nationwide are rushing to get ahead of potential rulings. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. You can catch us live weekdays from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and then 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time.
The National Desk, America's News Now.
Here's a quick look at our top stories. The man accused of killing 7 at a July 4th parade pleading not guilty in state court. Robert Crimo III could still face federal charges. Governor Greg Abbott announcing he's expanding Operation Lone Star as law enforcement reports several migrant encounters at the southern border. And attorney Ben Crump has joined a lawsuit against Baltimore City schools alleging students, especially black and brown students, are not getting a quality education. This week, more fallout from the reversal of Roe. States taking steps to stop abortion in their states. Mississippi's only operating abortion clinic closing its doors. And in Austin, Texas, one of the state's largest providers is planning to move to New Mexico. Whole Woman's Health wants to open a clinic near the Texas state line. But other states are protecting access. North Carolina's governor signing an executive order protecting women's reproductive rights. In North Dakota, the only remaining abortion clinic filed a lawsuit over the state's trigger law that goes into effect later this month. But activists argue more is at stake than just abortion rights, but also the abortion pill and medical emergencies. This week, our fact-check team looked into ectopic pregnancies and whether they're included in these bans or not.
With the reversal of Roe v. Wade, a major concern women are facing is ectopic pregnancies and the health risks associated with it. I'm back with our fact-check team tonight. Courtney, if a woman experiences an ectopic pregnancy, will she be able to get the necessary treatment? And if so, what would that look like?
Megan, while ectopic pregnancies are extremely rare, they can be life-threatening if they're left untreated. And the most common treatment is an abortion, either the procedure or the pill. Now, despite the reversal of Roe v. Wade, treating ectopic pregnancies is still legal in all states that ban abortions. All 13 trigger states include exemptions for medical emergencies or a threat to the mother's life. Many of the states also have laws specifically exempting treatment for ectopic pregnancies under the state's individual abortion statutes. And federal law requires the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to provide abortion medication under circumstances of rape, incest, or a threat to the mother's life.
Well, Connor, pro-choice advocates are still saying women will not be able to get a life-saving abortion under new laws. Is that true?
Well, as Courtney said, those states that she just mentioned do have exemptions, but the concern is that as written, they're too vague. For example, under Texas law, a doctor may perform an abortion if it's necessary to save a mother whose life is, quote, endangered. But pro-choice advocates argue those laws don't clearly define what that is.
Well, and there's still some concern about timing here.
That's right. The abortion pill may be taken up to the 11th week of pregnancy, but this is an issue because some states have abortion bans at 6 weeks. So even if a state doesn't expressly ban the pill, it may still be considered illegal under that timeline.
Great job looking into the issue, you both. The Fact Check team will continue to follow developments on these and other issues. You can also read this story with links on where they found their information. It's all on our website. Just go to thenationaldesk.com.
The reversal of Roe is making some same-sex couples nervous, fearful gay marriage could be next. In 29 states, the state constitution defines marriage as between a man and a woman, leading state lawmakers across the country to propose bills to codify same-sex marriage at the state level. Colleen Condon and her wife fought for the right to marry.
When I asked my wife to get married, she said, sure, once it's legal on our state.
Condon sued her state, South Carolina, in 2014 after a marriage license was put on hold, despite a federal appeals court with jurisdiction over South Carolina striking down a ban on same-sex marriage.
It wasn't a fluke. We looked at it and we saw that the law was clear that we should be allowed to be married.
Condon won her case, got married. Months later in 2015, the Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage nationwide.
We really thought this was done. And unfortunately, the Dobbs case deals with so much more than an abortion.
Federal law changed, but not state laws. Stephen Feuderall, a member of the Supreme Court Bar, says 29 state constitutions includes language that could ban same-sex marriage.
What would happen, say, if Obergefell was overruled, and then all of a sudden we no longer have any federal protection for same-sex marriage? In the 29 states that have a constitutional amendment that defines marriage as only between a man and a woman, that state would no longer recognize any marriage licenses between same-sex couples.
This year, the Virginia House blocked a measure to remove their constitutional ban on same-sex marriage. The majority of these state constitutional bans are recent, passing between 2004 and 2008 during the George W. Bush administration.
And these are largely, particularly red states that have instituted these constitutional bans. It was a top-down approach from that. They had a friendlier administration, one that wasn't going to stand in the way of any attempts by the states to amend their constitutions.
South Carolina's state constitution defines marriage as between a man and a woman. Condon now concerned about her own marriage after Justice Clarence Thomas' concurring opinion in overturning Roe calls to revisit rulings on same-sex relations and same-sex marriage.
We literally could have a situation where my marriage is invalid. My friend's adoption of their child could be invalid because they're two women.
However, some legal scholars think it is unlikely the Supreme Court will strike down the federal case legalizing same-sex marriage. Police in Richmond, Virginia say two men who were planning on shooting into a July 4th celebration are both in the country illegally. This week, in an interview with former acting Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, Mark Morgan, our Scott Thuman asked how a change in border policy could stop something like this from happening.
This is what we've talked about almost every single week for a very long time. And this isn't unusual. It was just a couple of months ago where we heard about an illegal alien that had stabbed his girlfriend 58 times in the neck and the face. We heard just recently that the FBI disrupted a terrorist plot to assassinate a former president, by which he was going to carry that out to smuggle 4 additional terrorists to a wide open southwest border. You know, Gina, I could do this all day long and give you examples of the devastation and destruction that happens from illegal aliens being allowed to enter this country at will. Right now, under this administration, more than 800,000 known gotaways, those that have broken our southwest border, evaded apprehension, and made their way to every town, city, and state. The harsh reality and truth, and this is not hyperbole, there are some dangerous people among them. There are murderers, rapists, pedophiles, and gang members. And this is what we are not talking about. You'll never hear that from the administration. And these are all preventable because these individuals should not be allowed in this country, but they are because of this administration's open border policies.
Well, maybe because of that, we saw several Texas counties declaring a border invasion.
and that's in hopes of pushing Governor Greg Abbott to do one statewide. You've got officials in Kinney, Goliad, Terrell, Uvalde have all been criticized, or all criticizing the Biden administration over what they call an open border policy. Mark, you were at that conference. What does this declaration really mean, though, for these counties, and could it possibly affect the overall migrant crisis? Is this declaration even going to be taken seriously?
Yeah, no, it's not. Look, we know we've had over 100,000 drug overdose and poisonings of Americans in this country, and they haven't changed anything to secure our border. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had 53 migrants die in a tractor trailer of a horrible death, and you haven't seen a single shift in policy to secure our border or stop the flow of illegal immigration. So no. And even though, as Ken Cuccinelli, the former deputy secretary of DHS, said, this was a historic press conference. It's the first time in the history of this country where a judge has declared an invasion under the rule of law, under the color of law. Yet this administration, not a word. And they're not going to change a single policy with respect to continuing to open the borders. So no, they're not going to take it seriously. But look, these counties, they express themselves very clearly. They're overrun, they're overwhelmed from a resource perspective, from a financial perspective, and a safety perspective. And we were there to provide an overview of how what happens at the southwest border, how their counties are overrun, how everything that's happening right there at the border doesn't stay there. It makes its way to every state in this country. So yeah, look, and I want to real quickly, Eugene, I want to be clear. Governor Abbott and AG Paxton are doing an incredible job. They've done more than any governor and AG to secure our border and try to push back on this administration's open border policies. That, full stop there. However, the reality is it's not enough. More needs to be done. So I'm hoping that Governor Abbott and AG Paxton will continue to discuss this and look at additional options under the Constitution.
And we also asked them about the recent decision by the Supreme Court to allow Remain in Mexico to end. That full interview posted now at thenationaldesk.com. A close call for a security guard making headlines. Coming up, the random attack and why some say they were not surprised at all. And a large donation sending citizens into an uproar why those books are causing so much controversy. The National Desk's team of reporters bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America. Tonight we start in Oregon, where a security guard had a close call. A bullet missed his head by inches.
Private company Eclipse Security's owner, Mark Mercer, says one of his guards, Calvin, was just patrolling his regular area in his car when suddenly
the guy got out of the car and just started shooting at him.
He reacted fast.
Sped away. And didn't stop, didn't stick around or anything else.
Mercer says surprisingly, all the bullets missed the car, but one. This one
hit the passenger window, shattered the window, continued on, went across Calvin and lodged itself in the windshield, and probably missed his head by about a foot.
People around the area say they're no longer surprised hearing about shootings, and they even ramped up after the pandemic.
Every week and a half, something happens somewhere in the city that involves a shooting.
And Mercer says he hopes there will be more consequences for shootings like this.
When people are allowed to do whatever they want to do, that's what they're going to do. When there's no accountability or no consequences for those actions.
In Florida, the victim of a hit and run is thankful for the help of strangers. His leg broken after getting hit on his bike. The driver simply took off, but so did a Good Samaritan who followed that driver, getting her license plate and then calling 911.
I think he
He's a very good person, and he deserves all the credit he gets.
Here to help one another, I think, you know, it's how you make the world a better place.
Hodge is recovering in the hospital after undergoing a 7-hour surgery to repair his left leg right there, which was broken in 5 places. Once again, books are causing a big controversy. In New York, several books about the LGBTQ community were donated to the Bethlehem Central School District for Pride Month. The problem? Some of the books donated are banned by other districts. While school board members found no problem with the donations, others did.
People have a side, and then they're not actually having a really, honest, robust conversation about why specific books are of concern, particularly when it comes to students of a certain age.
In a statement, the school superintendent said the donations reflect the district's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In Georgia, one woman's dream of working in the NFL is coming true. She's heading to Illinois to become the newest member of the Chicago Bears. Dory Stevens says she started this process in high school by helping out with the boys' basketball team. Now she's the Bears' new interim equipment manager. Stevens says she's aware it's a male-dominated field, but that's part of her motivation.
They just show you that women can do the same thing that men can do. So I'll just look up to them and just get that inspiration. This is what I love. This is my passion, so I'm just going to take it and just run with it.
Stevens says her father died when she was in high school, but she knows he's celebrating her win from above. The balance between safety and Second Amendment rights coming up. The gun legislation being drafted in one state that's trying to bridge that gap. And new unemployment numbers out Friday. Our Capitol Hill team breaking down what those numbers tell us about the state of our economy.
Welcome back to TND. Our Washington Bureau covers Capitol Hill and D.C. every day to bring you the important issues facing the country. Two of our correspondents, Audra Elnishar and Kayla Gaskins, are here with us today to share their insights and analysis. Audra, let's start with you. Inflation still a top concern for Americans. Searching for answers is Washington. All of this combines with new signs the Federal Reserve may get more aggressive. What did we learn this week?
Right, yeah, and those new inflation numbers are going to come out Wednesday, and everyone's on edge to see exactly where those numbers go, to see if we've hit our peak yet with inflation or if it's going to stay the same or get worse. But what we saw this week were actual minutes from the Federal Reserve's most recent meeting. So minutes, just like with any meeting, kind of gives you a tick-tock and a real insight into what the Federal Reserve officials are thinking. And basically what this told us was that they are very much considering even more aggressive interest rate hikes, even though they just rolled out their biggest hike in 28 years. Because again, there's the real fear that inflation has not yet hit its peaks. So we're getting the sense overall that the Fed is coming to terms with the fact that they may have to restrict or weaken the economy even more than they thought to get those inflationary pressures under control. And that really just, again, pokes holes in the theory that they can achieve the so-called soft landing, meaning stabilize prices without pumping the brakes so hard that the economy falls into a recession.
Yeah, tough decisions still to be made there. Kayla, meanwhile, you spent the week digging into education issues and how local school board elections are suddenly getting a lot more high profile.
Yeah, if you think back to a couple of years ago, school board elections were those elections that largely flew under the radar. Maybe there were a few contentious elections here and there, but overall, they really didn't get a lot of attention outside of those local districts. Well, All of that is changing. So now Florida Governor Ron DeSantis really leading the way on this by endorsing 10 candidates for local school board races throughout the state of Florida. We do expect him to give some more endorsements to come, and putting his political weight behind these candidates could really alter the dynamic on these school boards in some contentious areas where they might really make a difference, 1 or 2 flip seats. Now, Kevin Stitt in Oklahoma, the governor there, is also using his political weight by endorsing the state superintendent. And we really saw this shift in the pandemic when children began learning from home and parents began paying closer attention to what their kids were learning on a day-to-day basis in the classroom. And some found this alarming. There was also the mask mandates, the vaccination controversies that really got parents fired up to attend school board meetings. And then we've also had attorney, one of the most prominent civil rights attorney, Ben Crump, filed a lawsuit in Baltimore, and against the Baltimore City Public School Systems. And when he made that announcement, he was joined by candidates for the school board, the local school board there, who he's supporting in that race. So you really see this across the board. The school board race is getting elevated to a stance that I haven't really seen before.
Yeah, local elections becoming very much national elections. Finally, Audra, new unemployment numbers out. What are you seeing when it comes to the direction of the labor market?
It is absolutely resilient. If there are signs of a recession, we are not seeing them in the labor market. The unemployment rate was unchanged again at 3.6%, near record lows that we saw pre-pandemic. Payrolls added about 372,000 in June. That is higher than expectations. So this is, in any other economy, excellent news for the labor market. But in this economy, when inflation is so high, might be too much of a good thing, and it might be a sign to the Fed to act even more aggressive to get demand down. But again, they do it without triggering a recession. Wednesday, new inflation numbers are out, and that'll be our next big sign about where things need to go next.
All right, we'll check back in then. Thank you so much, Audra Elenishar, Kayla Gaskins. Appreciate it. Angela, back to you.
The movement to reform gun laws focused on keeping students safe, how one state is trying to make things safer, not just through laws, but also through family and community. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. We're back after this. How safe are our schools and communities? This week's horrific events at a 4th of July parade have added to the amount of mass shootings we've had so far this year in the U.S. Today, the National Desk's Tiffany Lane has details on gun safety legislation in Nevada, bringing resources into both the community and local schools.
Every single day, 110 people die on average because of senseless gun violence in our country, and another 200 are shot and wounded and survive.
Congressman Stephen Horsford says the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act is a big step for keeping citizens safe from gun violence. The legislation following the deadly elementary school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, the hate crime shooting in Buffalo, New York, and the Tulsa, Oklahoma hospital shooting. The bill was approved by Congress on the 30th anniversary of his father's death.
My dad was shot and killed when I was 19 years old. I was a freshman in college up in Reno. I received a call, like a lot of families who get a call about a loved one who's been shot. He died on the way to the hospital in an ambulance. So I never had a chance to say goodbye or to tell him I loved him.
Horsford is hopeful this gun legislation can prevent families from receiving the devastating call he did.
This legislation is going to help so that we can stem this violence, reduce crime, and save lives.
Let's break down what this bill does. It enhances background checks for 18 to 21-year-olds. It provides funding for states to implement red flag laws. There's also $2 billion of anti-violence investments to reduce crime. The bill includes $250 million for community violence intervention from the Break the Cycle of Violence bill Congressman Horsford authored.
The $250 million for community violence intervention is to community-based, faith-based, nonprofit organizations that are doing this work now and not being funded.
Some of that money can play a role in our Vegas schools.
Our schools are the center of community. They're like the church. We need them to be safe from violence, particularly gun violence.
Horsford says one of those groups that can benefit is dads in schools, male leaders in the community who volunteer to help provide prevention through presence on school campuses that request them. News 3 was at a local elementary school campus with these volunteers the day the Uvalde shooting happened.
Standing on the campus of an elementary school the same day that children were dying in Uvalde, Texas, it was so hopeless and helpless feeling. But now, seeing this legislation that gives us hope.
How can the bill help with dads in schools?
This could fund the staffing resources. This can fund the actual dads. This can fund training so that they get active shooter training. They get how to respond if there's some sort of event. It educates the public.
Here's a further breakdown of funding for schools when it comes to the bill. There is $500 million for school-based mental health services and staff, $500 million to help train and diversify the pipeline of school counselors, social workers, and psychologists, $1 billion to support activities that improve student learning, $50 million for out-of-school programs like extracurricular and after-school programs that target older youth, and $300 million for school safety to institute safety measures in and around schools and support violence prevention training for school personnel and students.
I'm a product of the Clark County School District, first and foremost. And as a parent and as a community member, I am as horrified as anyone about the incidence of violence that occurs anywhere in our community, but especially our schools.
Do we have any idea of how much of this money will come into our community here? Do we have any idea how much will come here?
We will continue to work with the federal agency that will be designated with these funds to make sure that Nevada and Las Vegas in particular gets our funding. But we're already working to help support that. I know Superintendent Jara at the Clark County School District, this is a priority for him and the board.
That was Tiffany Lane reporting. That's it for the weekend edition of the National Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. So check your local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up on the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy your weekend.